friends, and welcome back to the Sweat Simple podcast. My name is Brooks Herbis, and I'm an online fitness, nutrition, and mindset coach who's here to help you simplify and make sense out of the all too confusing fitness and nutrition industry. Let's be real, there's a lot of conflicting information online, and it can be hard to know what's legit and who to trust. In every episode, I'll be sharing the science and psychology behind health, fitness, and long-lasting behavior change. But I'll also be sharing real-life practical application, because all of the best info in the world only matters if you can actually apply it to your real life. So grab a coffee, water, glass of wine, or lace up your walking shoes, and let's dive in. Hello, you guys. Welcome back to the Sweat Simple podcast. I am so excited because I am finally back from a crazy few months of travel. I feel like I have not recorded a podcast in a couple weeks because I was getting ahead of them, and it feels so nice to be back in a routine. I also feel like today my jet lag is lifting a little bit. I have had such bad brain fog the last few days, and I feel like finally today I'm feeling more like my normal, creative, functioning human self. And you guys are probably all very excited to hear me finally stop talking about travel, because it feels like all of these intros the past couple months even have been all about my travels and being out of my routine. So we are finally saying goodbye to that very fun but overwhelming, exhausting phase and entering into more grounding and routines. But I am extra excited to be back because this week I have a really juicy podcast episode for you guys, and it is all about the best fat loss method. And this episode is so important because fat loss has become so confusing. Fat loss has always felt confusing, but especially with social media, it feels like every time we hop on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, there is some new best method for losing fat. And what's extra confusing is that a lot of these methods are contradicting themselves, and they're also being promoted as the only way to lose fat. So you could hop on Instagram on a Monday and have someone pushing keto, saying that the only way to lose weight is to, cut out most of your carbs. And then you could scroll to the next post and it's saying that you have to have bread and you can't be cutting out bread in order to lose weight. And it's all just very conflicting. It's all just very confusing. You have people pushing carnivore diets where you're only eating meat. You have people pushing diets for certain blood types. You have people saying you have to intermittent fast. You have people talking about insulin spikes. It is all just so confusing. Like, you have people who say that macro counting is the only way to change your body composition. And then on the flip side, you have people saying that macro counting is ruining your relationship with food. You can't eat intuitively. Like, it goes on and on and on. And it's truly no wonder that you are feeling so lost all the time and so confused about how to get started. In fact, all of this misinformation and confusion is the main reason I became a coach in the first place, because I remember, 8-10 years ago when I was going through my own fat loss journey, I was just lost all the time because social media wasn't as rampant as it is now, but I was subscribed to a lot of fitness newsletters, and it was more like the women's health magazines and getting on Pinterest. And every single week, every single month, I was hearing something different. I was hearing about some new best fat loss method. So in this podcast episode today, I really wanted to bust that myth and share that there is one best method for fat loss, but it's not actually a specific method. Stick with me, I promise. We're going to get there. But the best method in general for fat loss is going to be the one that you can stick to most consistently. And this is where you might be thinking it's something that it's not. Because most people, when they hear, okay, the method that you can stick to most consistently, you immediately go to the physical method. You're like, there must be some method that is going to work the best for me, that I'm going to be able to stick to the most consistently. And well, that's true. Well, there are fat loss methods that are more sustainable than others. The best method, the one that you can stick to most consistently, often doesn't come down to the method itself. And like I said, there are going to be physical methods that are more sustainable than others. Like anything that has you cutting out entire food groups probably won't be very sustainable. And you've probably experienced that before. You know that feeling, like trying to grit through every craving, completely cut out your favorite foods, or eat really low calories. Like you've done that for a few weeks, but eventually you're starving again. You want to eat the bread, you want to have the cookie, whatever it is. Then you eat that food you're not quote unquote supposed to. You feel like you messed up. You go overboard eating that food because you're going to start over the next day. And then you're starting over at square one. You go back to that restriction. You have a moment where you feel like you messed up. You overeat. You go back to restriction. It's this never ending cycle. And that right there is what I'm talking about. Because yes, there are physical methods of fat loss that are more sustainable than others. There are, whether it's calorie counting, whether it's intermittent fasting for you, whatever it might be, there are methods, physical methods, that are going to be more sustainable than others. But most of the time, the reason that you can't stay consistent is coming not from the fat loss method itself, it's coming down to your mindset. Because if we think back to that cycle of restrict, mess up, overeat, restrict, that cycle, that never-ending cycle, that yo-yo diet cycle could happen with any one of these fat loss methods. It could happen if you're tracking calories. It could happen if you're doing keto. It could happen if you're intermittent fasting. That all or nothing binge restrict mentality isn't about the fat loss method itself. It's about your mindset. It's about feeling like you're either perfectly following that plan, that fat loss method that you laid out, or you're messing up. So it's not the fat loss method itself, it's the all or nothing thinking that's making it impossible for you to stay consistent. And it really won't matter if you have the most perfect, sustainable fat loss method in the world. If you're still falling into this all or nothing thinking trap, you're going to continue to throw in the towel every time you feel like you aren't being perfect. And I'm sure you guys have realized at this point, life is very rarely perfect. Like you can think back to all of those moments when fat loss, whatever method you're using to lose weight, feels really hard. It's probably when you're really busy, when you get tired, when you have social events. Some things are just not always going to go as planned. And if you're throwing in the towel every single time one of those things pops up, you're probably throwing in the towel at least once a week, if not more. Like I know the people in my audience, I know you guys, I know that you are busy, you are stressed, you have a lot going on in your life, and things are probably not perfectly going to plan at least once a week, which means it feels like at least once a week you are throwing in the towel, you are starting over. And throwing in the towel once a week, starting over every single Monday, every single Thursday, whatever that day is for you, that you feel like you are in that never-ending cycle of starting over time and time again, that's not exactly a recipe for long-term consistency and for long-term sustainable fat loss. So even though there are physical methods for fat loss that are going to feel more sustainable, the actual best method for fat loss is consistency. But consistency isn't possible until you get out of your own way and stop this all or nothing thinking cycle. Because like we've seen, it doesn't matter if you have like the perfect macro split, if you follow the diet that was created perfectly individually for your blood type, whatever it is, if you take that individualized supplement plan that was given to you, it doesn't matter what the physical method is. If you can't ditch the all or nothing thinking, you are going to continue to struggle with fat loss. And this is unfortunately where I found most coaching programs to go wrong. They are so focused on the physical method of fat loss rather than the mindset behind it. Coaches are so honed in on, I am a macro coach, I'm an intuitive eating coach, I teach my clients how to build balance plates. And all of those things are important. At some point, always, you do need a physical method to fat loss. That is a given. But that is not all that matters. And as you're seeing, you could have the quote unquote best physical method, but until you are consistent with it, until you can ditch the all or nothing thinking behind it, that physical method is only going to get you so far. So it's not about macro counting or intuitive eating or this very specific workout plan that you have to purchase. Like, yes, again, there does need to be that physical method for getting into a calorie deficit, but that physical method is just barely scratching the surface when it comes to fat loss. And this is why I have developed my AIMS coaching framework after working with hundreds of women, because just focusing on the physical fat loss method is not enough. There is an entire step of my AIMS coaching framework that is all about your mindset. Because like we just outlined in this podcast episode, ditching the all or nothing thinking so that you won't just lose fat, but you'll keep it off for good is the best method for fat loss. It's not only about calorie counting, hitting your protein, learning how to eat intuitively. Those things are important. Those things can be part of the coaching process. But until you take it a step further and get to that mindset part of fat loss, you're going to continue to feel stuck, because we don't just need to get you into a calorie deficit. We need to get you out of that cycle. We need to get you out of that throw in the towel, feel like you messed up, overeat, restrict cycle. We got to get out of that. And you can't calorie deficit your way out of that cycle. That is a whole other step to the process. Now, if you're like nodding along and you're like, okay, this is me, this is what I struggle with. Like, I know I can eat in a calorie deficit. I know how to macro count. I know what healthy eating looks like. It's not that part of the process that I'm struggling with. That is why other programs haven't worked for you. And I have really great news for you, because I am hosting a free challenge that starts October 8th that's modeled around this same coaching framework that I use for my one-on-one coaching clients. So over 3 interactive days, live trainings, you're going to uncover why fat loss has been feeling so hard this year, why those physical methods haven't been working for you, and what to do about it. So we're going to be going deep into things like self-sabotage, all or nothing thinking, those things that have been holding you back this year and you haven't even realized it. So if this episode resonated with you, if you know it's not about the physical fat loss method, but it's the things that are holding you back from staying consistent, I highly, highly recommend joining this challenge. It is completely free. You can join in the show notes, and it is going to be so juicy. So I know you guys don't want to miss this, especially if you have been nodding along this entire podcast episode and feeling like I was speaking directly to you. So to sum it all up, there is not one best physical method for fat loss. The quote unquote best method for fat loss is the one that you can stick to consistently. But in order to stick to any of those methods consistently, we first need to work through your mindset. We need to ditch the self-sabotaging and ditch the all or nothing thinking. So don't continue to spend your time spinning your wheels trying to find the perfect plan. the perfect method for fat loss. Instead, I want you guys to start focusing your time and attention on adjusting your mindset and ditching your all or nothing thinking so that you can get out of this never ending ongoing cycle that you're currently stuck in. That is the only way that you're going to be successful long term, and the only way that you are going to not just lose the fat, but truly keep it off for good. So I hope this episode was helpful. I hope this has given you guys a little bit of understanding as to why you have been struggling with any of these physical fat loss methods and why you keep seeing them work for other people and not for you. Because it's not about the physical method. It's about taking things a step further and really starting to work through your mindset around food, exercise, and all of those extra things. So if this episode resonated with you, like I said, please join my free challenge in the show notes. We start October 8th. We go the 8th through the 10th. It is going to be such a fun 3 days, and I would love to have you guys be a part of it. If you have any questions on the challenge or anything I talked about in this episode, please feel free to shoot me a DM. I am always here for you guys. I love to hear from you, and I will see you next week.